Thank you for tuning into another video from JRM Recaps. Today we will be discussing the film, Taken. Hope you enjoy. Spoilers ahead. The film opens with a retired government agent named Bryan. He is looking for a present for his 17-year-old daughter, Kim's birthday. Bryan shows up at an extravagant mansion where Kim's mom, Lenore, and her stepdad, Stuart, lives. Lenore is very cold toward him even though their daughter is very happy with her present. Afterward, Bryan is by himself in his little modest condo. Three friends, all retired agents, come around for poker, beer, and steaks. One of them, Sam, asks if Bryan wants to make some money working security for a pop star at her show. Bryan asks the pop star, Shira, for guidance to give his daughter who wishes to be a singer. Shira replies, tell her to pick another career. At the show, security is occupied by a crowd of fans breaking through some gates. Bryan escorts Shira away from the crowd, but is approached by an attacker with a knife, who Bryan brings down quickly. As a thank you, Shira offers to assist Bryan's daughter with a manager and a vocal coach if she has any natural talent. Bryan is extremely excited and plans to tell Kim about Shira's proposal. Lenore also comes to the lunch and it turns out he was only invited to sign the parental consent form Kim needs for her planned vacation to Paris with her friend Amanda. Bryan is hesitant to agree, knowing the risks of some dangerous parts of Paris. However, Kim explains that she'll be lodging with Amanda's cousins. The following day, Bryan appears at Stuart's mansion with the signed consent form, a prepaid international phone, and a few conditions. 1. He must take Kim to the airport. 2. Kim must call him when she arrives in Paris. And 3. Kim must call him every evening to let him know the address and telephone number of any new place she will be spending the night. At the airport, as Bryan is removing Kim's luggage from the car, he sees a guide of Europe with a few cities circled in a pocket of Kim's bag. He confronts Lenore, who concedes that the young ladies are really going to follow the rock band U2 on their European tour, not simply just staying in Paris. Bryan is irate, however it is too late to do anything about it. In Paris, while waiting in the line for a taxi at the airport, the two young ladies meet a nice, attractive Parisian man named Peter. He recommends they all share a taxi for the costly ride downtown. Amanda quickly agrees and Kim hesitantly accepts. While waiting, they have Peter snap their photo with Kim's telephone. Appearing gentlemanly, Peter has the taxi drop the young ladies off first. He welcomes them to a party that very night and Amanda enthusiastically agrees. As the taxi drives off, Peter quickly makes a call on his telephone and just says 2 girls, about 18, and the location of the condo which they are staying at. Amanda casually tells her the cousins are currently in Spain. Back in the US, a concerned Bryan glances at the arrival info and sees that Kim's plane has landed. Bryan tries to call Kim's telephone, but Amanda has set the music very loud in the condo and neither one of them hears the telephone ring. At long last, Bryan gets a hold of Kim. She walks around to the opposite side of the condo to hear her father better. While they talk, Kim can see Amanda through the windows across the courtyard when out of nowhere sees 2 men snatch Amanda. Panicked, Kim tells her father what she saw. He instructs her to go into the closest room and hide under the bed. Asking her a series of questions, he discovers that Kim and Amanda split a taxi with a man named Peter. Now, he tells her, the next part is very important. They are going to take you. Bryan tells her to leave her telephone on, and she will have about 5 to 10 seconds to shout out any description of them she can. Bryan connects a recording device to his telephone. 2 men enter the room and talk in a strange foreign language. He instructs Kim to hold the telephone towards the men so he can hear what they are speaking about. The 2 men seem to have left the room and Kim tells her father they left, when abruptly she is grabbed from under the bed. Adhering to Bryan's instructions, she shouts out, beard. 6 feet. Tattoo, right hand, moon and star. Bryan hears heavy breathing and lets the kidnapper know that if he lets his little girl go right away, he won't track him down. But if he doesn't let Kim go, then he'll hunt him down, referring to his special skill set as a covert agent. The kidnapper, having a thick accent, answers, good luck. Bryan sends the tape discussion to Sam, his former agent friend from the show. Bryan then storms over to Stewart's and approaches him about potential business enemies of Stewart. Bryan realizes Stewart's business matters are not the source of the issue, and he tells Stewart he needs a private jet plane to Paris. Bryan scans Kim's room and all her belongings for potential clues. In the meantime, he is on speakerphone with Sam so Lenore can listen. Sam gives a thorough report about the language is Albanian, and he even pinpoints the accent down to a particular town in Albania. Their leader's name is Marco, and he is an exceptionally powerful person. Sam lets him know that the Albanians kidnap young ladies for prostitution, and Bryan has about 96 hours before Kim will vanish forever. In Paris, Bryan first gets into Amanda's cousin's condo. He finds the memory card from Kim's crushed telephone. Bryan finds the photo Peter took at the airport and focuses on a reflection of Peter in the photograph. At the airport, Peter is utilizing the same share a taxi line with a Swedish blonde. Bryan attacks Peter, but he is able to take off due to Peter's associate attacking him. Bryan discards Peter's associate and pursues the taxi. Peter runs into traffic and is killed when a truck hits him. Bryan then meets with an old friend named Jean-Claude, who is with French intelligence, to request help. The Frenchman lets Bryan know where the Albanian pimped prostitutes are found, but cautions Bryan to avoid the area. As Bryan leaves, Jean-Claude sets up a tail to follow him. After obtaining a rental vehicle, Bryan meets with an Albanian translator and tells him to wait in the vehicle after they drive to the Pigalle region of Paris. Bryan then intentionally wastes a prostitute's time so her pimp will approach him and demand some cash. Bryan then sneakily plants a listening device on the pimp. Back in the vehicle, Bryan has the translator listen to the sound feed from the device and decipher the Albanian conversation. They discuss experiencing problems with some new product at a building site nearby. Bryan excuses the translator and grabs the Albanian English dictionary he had requested him to bring. At the building site, there is a long line of men waiting back to enter a trailer. Bryan behaves like a customer and joins the line. When Bryan arrives at the beginning of the line, he hands the doorman his cash and gets a piece of paper with a single digit on it. Inside the trailer, ropes have been fastened with sheets hung over them to make rooms. As Bryan goes down the passageway, he investigates each room. Bryan enters one room and finds a bed with a tranquilized woman lying on it, but it is not Kim. He begins pulling more sheets away to take a look at the other rooms. Since each room has a client, this intrusion begins an uproar. Bryan has to face a couple of bouncers as he advances along the length of the trailer. In the last room, Bryan sees his daughter's coat and a sedated woman with hair like Kim's. Barging in, he finds it is also not Kim. He attempts to ask her questions, yet she is so sedated she can't speak. Bryan carries her to a jeep nearby, hot wires the starter, and, after a wild pursuit, makes his getaway from a gang of furious Albanians. He drives to a quiet hostel and rents 2 rooms from the owner, who happens to be another old friend of his. In one of the rooms, Bryan puts together an IV drip and infuses the young lady with Narcan, starting a super quick detox of her system. Afterward, Jean-Claude requests to meet with Bryan out in the open by the waterway. When Jean-Claude shows up, his telephone rings. It is Bryan telling him that he does not trust meeting with him until he gets Kim back. Jean-Claude tells him he persuaded his boss to approve a ticket to send Bryan back to America for past services, but Bryan declines. In the meantime, Jean-Claude's men have been locating the origin of Bryan's telephone call, and a team of men burst onto a nearby rooftop. There they find a telephone outfitted with a walkie-talkie while Bryan is actually on another rooftop close by. Bryan leaves easily without any issues. The young lady returns to consciousness and tells Bryan she got the coat from another young lady. All she can recall is it was at a house with red entryways on the Rue Paradis. Bryan tracks down the house, strolls in confidently, and presents Jean-Claude's business card as his own. Bryan is escorted beyond a few thugs to a filthy kitchen. 4 Albanians are situated around a table. Bryan attempts to discover who the leader is, however each of them says that they are Marco and all from the town that Bryan's translator had identified. Bryan lets them know that their previous police contact, Mr. Macon, had been transferred. Pretending to be Jean-Claude, tells them from now on he will be collecting the bribes. After some haggling, an arrangement is settled and Bryan believes he has distinguished the figure from Kim's telephone. However, before he leaves, Bryan stops and says a friend gave him a note in Albanian. He hands it to the probable leader and requests that he decipher it. The leader, who is the actual Marco, answers best of luck. Bryan recognizes Marco's voice right away and says to him, "You don't remember me, do you? I told you I was going to find you," and suddenly Bryan is shooting and fighting the house full of armed men. After the dust settles, Bryan has killed every one of them except Marco. Bryan looks for Kim in every one of the upper rooms of the building. He finds a few ladies handcuffed to beds and Amanda's dead body, apparently because of a drug overdose. Bryan uses electricity to torture Marco. After attempting to endure it, Marco tells Bryan that Kim was sold to a man named St. Clair. Bryan then walks out and leaves Marco shouting in anguish, most likely to die. Jean-Claude gets back home for dinner to find Bryan is visiting. Jean-Claude's wife, Isabelle, asks Jean-Claude to put their 2 children to bed. As he does, he gets a gun from the bathroom and tucks it into the rear of his belt. At the dinner table, Bryan nonchalantly talks about moving to Paris and drops the location of the Albanian pimp house and Macon's name. Isabelle ignorantly says that she personally knows Macon. Bryan then confronts Jean-Claude and commands to know who St. Clair is. Jean-Claude takes out his gun and points it at Bryan. Bryan then throws some bullets onto the dinner table which are from the gun Jean-Claude is holding. Bryan pulls out his own gun and shoots Isabelle in the arm and says that his next shot will kill her unless he gives him info on St. Clair. Jean-Claude then goes into his office and uses his computer to get to police records that identify and locate St. Clair. Bryan then advises Jean-Claude to tell his wife he apologizes for shooting her and he then pistol whips the Frenchman to the floor. Again pretending to be Jean-Claude, Bryan accesses a party St. Clair is having. Bryan finds St. Clair is throwing a much more sinister party on a lower level. Bryan then pretends to be a server and goes into a darkened room facing a wall of glass, one of a progression of the same sorts of rooms that circle an open stage. On the stage is a youthful, sedated, half-clothed young lady and a handler. In each darkened room, a bidder presses a red button when they wish to bid. The sale closes and the young lady is taken away. The salesperson reports the last and best lady of the night's auction, a virgin American, who is Kim. Then Bryan aims a weapon at the purchaser in this room and orders him to outbid the others to buy her. The offering goes to $500,000. But, after leaving the room with the purchaser still at gunpoint, Bryan is knocked out from behind. He wakes up suspended from a pipe just beneath the ceiling. He tells the British man, St. Clair, that he is the last young lady's father. St. Clair replies, "Too bad. It's business and she is sold already." He then commands his thugs to execute Bryan discreetly and leaves the room. Bryan figures out how to break the pipe and kills the guards while getting away. Bryan meets the astonished St. Clair standing by the elevator. St. Clair begs for his life by saying it was just business and letting him know that Kim will be at a dock. Bryan shoots him dead and sends the elevator up to the party. Bryan rushes to the river, however misses the big yacht which Kim is on, as it travels down the waterway. Bryan drives a stolen vehicle against one-way traffic to gain position on the Pont des Arts bridge, then jumps onto the boat as it passes underneath. On board, a Middle Easterner sheik lies on a bed as a group of ladies in veils are brought in. Bryan fights the sheik's guards and enters the room, where the sheik has a knife held to Kim's throat. Bryan aims his gun and the sheik starts to say, "We can negotiate," as Bryan fires a bullet into his head. Back in the United States, Kim is brought back together with her mom. Lenore even hugs Bryan in gratitude. Afterward, Bryan strangely gathers Kim and brings her to a very nice house. He knocks on the door and pop star Cher answers it. Shira takes Kim by the arm while saying she had heard Kim would like to be a singer, and tells her, "Let's see what you've got." Thank you for watching our recap. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for future videos. Also, try some of our other videos displayed on screen.